Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're diving into what has to be one of the most wildly misunderstood and frankly mischaracterized placements in all of astrology, the 12th house moon. If you've spent any time at all looking at birth charts, you already know the standard interpretations for this one. They're usually all doom and gloom, emphasizing isolation, hidden sorrows, and this constant urge to just withdraw from the world. But what if I told you that most of those textbook readings stop way, way too early? Today, we're going to peel back those surface symptoms and look at what is actually running under the hood of this placement.
Okay, let's just jump right into it. Emotions trapped in quiet prisons. This very dramatic little quote perfectly captures the brooding, kind of dark reputation that the 12th house moon gets slapped with. It sounds incredibly heavy, doesn't it? And framing it like this usually makes people think of the 12th house moon as some sort of emotional liability or weakness. But we are absolutely going to debunk that idea today. We're going to see that this isn't about being emotionally deficient, and it's certainly not about purposely shutting people out. It's actually just a highly specific, deeply internal way of processing the world.
So here's the big question we're tackling. Is this highly stigmatized astrological placement a genuine liability, or is it just a completely misunderstood superpower? I really want you to shift your perspective with me for a second. Instead of looking at this through the lens of emotional difficulty, which is what most psychological frameworks assume by default, we are going to uncover the functional logic and the hidden architecture behind this placement. But to do that, we need to zoom out a bit and lay down the foundation.
Now, as we already know, the astrological moon governs our emotional baseline. It's the core of what makes us feel secure, and it dictates how we process daily life through a felt, intuitive sense rather than, cold, hard logic. It is the absolute beating heart of your inner world, acting as the vital baseline for how you react to and absorb the environment around you. Crucially, you can think of the moon as a regulatory system. It's essentially the bouncer managing the delicate boundary between your vulnerable inner life and the absolute chaos of the outside world. How you regulate that boundary and the amount of conscious effort it takes to bring your latent talents into reality depends entirely on where your moon is placed.
And this functional difference becomes so clear when we compare different charts. Think about Albert Einstein's nocturnal 6th house moon compared to Frida Kahlo's diurnal 10th house moon. The hemisphere your moon hangs out in changes the whole game. It shifts how the moon operates and dictates exactly how much conscious, deliberate effort is needed to bring its traits up to the surface.
So, what happens when you drop that sensitive, emotional regulatory system straight into the 12th house? Well, the 12th house governs the interior. It rules over things that are enclosed, things that cross ordinary boundaries, and whatever happens behind the scenes in reduced social visibility. When the moon lands here, its emotional functions don't just magically vanish or become toxic. Not at all. They just start operating off the grid, privately. The emotional life of a 12th house moon is incredibly rich and substantial. But there is a massive gap between what they feel on the inside and what they actually project on the outside.
So the absolute crucial takeaway here is the difference, the massive functional difference between loneliness and solitude. For most people, actually scratch that, for almost everyone, when they see someone pulling away, they immediately assume loneliness, which is that painful, unwanted feeling of being disconnected. But for the 12th house moon, they're actually seeking solitude. Solitude is a structural, hardwired requirement for their emotional processing system. They need to withdraw not because they're failing socially, but because they literally require low social stimulation to recover from the sheer emotional absorption of just being around other people.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of how this plays out in real life. Step 1 is just basic external social engagement, going out into the world. Step 2 is where things get tricky, uninsulated emotional absorption. You see, a 12th house moon operates with way less natural insulation against incoming emotional noise than the rest of us. They soak up the environment's distress like a sponge. So step 3 absolutely must be a required private withdrawal. And then step 4 is where the magic happens. Interior processing and recovery. If they skip steps 3 and 4, their entire system just goes into overload.
And this functional reality has huge, actionable consequences for their careers. Stick a 12th house moon in a loud, open-plan office with constant social stimulation, and they are gonna fry. They'll experience sustained emotional fatigue. It's not because they lack professional drive. It's an environmental load issue. The absolute best work setups for these folks include remote work, deep research roles, or helping professions. They thrive in any job that naturally bakes in periods of solitude and quiet processing time throughout the day. because they're constantly absorbing the emotional weather of everyone around them. Their biggest everyday hurdle is boundary management. It has to be deliberate. They are constantly having to pause and ask, wait, am I upset, or did I just absorb this stress from my partner or my boss? If they don't consciously manage those boundaries and communicate what they need, those unspoken needs turn into invisible grievances, and those will compound over time simply because nobody else even knew they were there.
Let's move on and see how this builds when we actually layer specific zodiac signs on top of it, because that modifies the daily vibe completely. Take a Taurus moon here. They process things so slowly and sensorily, they cannot be rushed and need environmental calm before they can even articulate their feelings. An Aries moon takes all that natural fiery directness and channels it entirely inward, which builds up intense internal pressure. A Virgo moon, that adds analytical precision, which often turns into relentless, exhausting self-scrutiny. And a Pisces moon makes the person so boundary fluid that their emotional absorption gets cranked up to the absolute maximum.
All right, it is time to completely rewrite the narrative on this placement. The biggest misconception is that when a 12th house moon goes quiet, they are strategically withholding information or hiding their feelings out of avoidance or just showing emotional weakness. The reality is far more fascinating. They possess a highly specific, deeply interior processing architecture. Just because you don't see visible emotional expression doesn't mean they don't care. It simply means their processing is running through private, internal channels. They aren't shutting down. They're just processing deeply in a way that demands quiet.
Now, what's genuinely amazing here is that this exact heavy load is literally what forges their superpowers. Because they absorb so much and reflect so deeply, they develop this profound, almost scary psychological insight into other people. They have unmatched practical interpersonal intelligence, like they can read the unspoken subtext of any room the second they walk in. All that interior engagement produces highly considered, reflective judgment that others naturally rely on. And all that rich, private emotional material, that becomes the pure fuel for highly original creative capacity.
So, I want to leave you with something to really chew on today. If outward, visible emotion isn't the only proof of deep feeling, what hidden depths might you be completely misjudging in the people around you? The next time you come across someone who just needs quiet solitude to process the world, remember the architecture of the 12th house moon. They are not trapped in some quiet prison, they are just doing the profound, invisible work of feeling everything deeply. Thanks so much for joining me for this explanation, and keep exploring those hidden depths.